the Lower Colgan Creek Restoration Project is what I'm going to talk to you about today. And it's an interesting place to be doing ecology and to be working with native plants because it has been altered so much and so many times. And it was just altered one more time, and we're hoping that now it's on its way in the right direction. We'll see. So we'll talk a lot about this project today, and it has been in the works really for since 1999 is when it first went to City Council as a priority project in our Creek Master Plan development process. And then we went off and did some other big projects, and then in 2010 came back and started to work on this project in earnest. So we did our CEQA, we did our concept planning, and we've been chipping away at construction since then in 3 phases. So you'll learn more about those in a minute. But just to have that in your mind that I'm going to focus on 1 phase today that we just constructed, but it's embedded into a larger process and project. So here's a little aerial image that we're looking at here during construction. So you'll see there's all the big yellow equipment there. So where are we in space I want to just kind of get grounded into space and time first part of the presentation. So we are in the Russian River watershed, which you can see running, right. Can you see my mouse if I do this? No, you cannot. Well, you can see the Russian River watershed there. You're probably familiar. That's home to steelhead, chinook, coho, and really has been a vibrant and thriving place for those fish and for many people for a long, long time. As recently as 1968, the watershed had a run of 50,000 wild steelhead. Then within that, the largest kind of sub-watershed to the Russian River watershed is the Laguna de Santa Rosa. You all are probably quite familiar. So that is the largest tributary. It's a wetland of international importance, and it's home to steelhead and coho. Then within that, the Colgan Creek watershed is about 5,000 acres. So it starts up on Taylor Mountain, and it flows back behind Costco. If you can picture the future Kiwanis Springs Park that they'll be developing. And Old Colgan Creek is pretty much a channelized undergrounded creek, and then Kiwanis Springs Creek, and they run together. And then they come under Highway 101, under Santa Rosa Avenue, under Highway 101, and then they outlet into Southwest Santa Rosa. And it eventually makes its way out of the city, through the county, into the Laguna de Santa Rosa, right by the Laguna wastewater treatment plant, if you can picture that, just to the north. So that's the creek we're talking about. So we don't have, of course, any photos of the pre-colonization period of this area, but we do have written accounts from the early European descendant settlers of this area. So when they came here and they encountered Pomo people, Coast Miwok people who were tending this land, they wrote about how beautiful it was because it was being so tended. In 1972, George Vancouver describes his arrival, saying that for about 20 miles, it could only be compared to a park. He and many others described the stately oaks, the tall wild oats, which we should talk about in a minute, the wetlands, and the huge numbers of small mammals in particular. They talk a lot about small rabbits, things like that, just being everywhere. And then, so that's, by 1842, John Bidwell comes and he describes seeing trees standing like soldiers in lines from atop the Mayacamas Mountains. And when approached up close, these riparian ribbons are often so densely interwoven along banks of rivers that birds can't fly through them. Others noted when the adjacent uplands are treeless, there are always woods to be found along the streams. This may have been because the native populations who tended these areas were already being decimated by smallpox at that time, and so they may not have been tending as closely right there and along the streams, or it may, we don't know exactly what was going on. Maybe that was all part of the tending process, the coppicing of the willows and keeping them quite dense in that way. So it's hard to really even put together a historical baseline for what this stream would have looked like, but we've done our best. Prudensky Chatham did some concept designing back in the early planning stages of the project, and they looked at several different reference reaches of stream, including really looking back into historical baseline data. And this is Colgan Creek, just downstream of Stony Point, which is just downstream of our project area. So this aerial is from 1942. It's our first set of aerials of Sonoma County. But you can see, even though there's definitely already farming and quite a bit of development by 1942, you can see the signature of this meandering stream. And it kind of goes right through here, meanders a bit, and then all these little tributaries. I can step back so you all can see a little bit better. All these little tributaries, and as the tributaries had meandered across that plain over thousands and thousands and thousands of years, they left these kind of remnant little oxbows that often turned into vernal pools. And it would have been, dotted with these oaks. And even though we have this kind of example of a wide meandering stream across a wide floodplain with many different interconnected wetlands, even in this photo, there's not trees lining this creek at this point. So we don't know if that's been altered significantly by 1942. Have they been grazed down? Have they been cut? We don't know. But likely would have been tree lined in the past. But you can see the shape there is what's important. So this is
question. What's that that's blocked off on the top?
Let's see. That's Todd Road. Yep. So just just upstream is our project area. So you can see this area has been turned into a ditch by 1942. This is the same year, but the same creek just upstream has very much become a different shape. You're not seeing the meanders, you're not seeing all the little tributaries, you're not seeing all the wetlands. It's mostly being farmed with orchards, hay, etc. And it has that hard 90-degree turn that you can see just along the bottom of the screen here, where it goes literally straight down and takes a perfect 90-degree turn. Creeks don't do that, you probably have noticed. But back then, the thinking was this, read this little quote here. So this is from American Forest Magazine in 1935. Oops, sorry about that. Let's see, the article was sponsored by the DuPont Explosives Department, which is the same DuPont chemical company that exists today and invented nylon, Kevlar, Teflon. So the DuPont Explosives Department was in deep with the American Forest Magazine, I guess. And they say crooked streams are a menace to life and crops in the areas bordering on their banks. The twisting and turning of the channel retards the flow and reduces the capacity of the stream to handle large volumes of water. Floods results, crops are ruined, lives are lost. Banks are undermined, causing cave-ins steal valuable acreage. In many instances, straightening out a stream has doubled its capacity for disposing of runoff water. Dynamite may be used efficiently and economically in taking the kinks out of a crooked stream. So, people were just doing their best. But the thinking was very single-minded, and the output was crops. All the native trees, the native plants, they're just a problem. There's something to get around. So that's the state we're in by 1942. Then by 1970, Colgan Creek, it was a ditch, becomes a bigger ditch. So there's a big flood control effort, and the idea was really to drain the urban core. This downtown Santa Rosa had started to develop, Santa Rosa Avenue, all of that had started to develop, and these multiple different agencies, actually the city was not one of these agencies, although at the time we would have probably benefited from this in some ways. We, as a society, thought it was great to go through and just channelize all these streams and really just get the water out of the urban areas as quickly as possible. We don't care where it went, we don't care what it does, just go out. And so they were formed into these basically large trapezoidally shaped ditches. This one happened to be concrete in the northern section and then earthen in the southern section. And it still more or less follows that same straightened configuration. You can see still the 90-degree turn. It has pretty steep banks. They're trying to fit as much water into a small space as possible. So over time, they came back and did some tree planting, but a lot of this stream was still relatively bare. So, oh, there we are. I'm filling in now, just so you all can kind of really see where that waterway is. So that left us with some pretty degraded hydrological conditions and some pretty degraded habitat conditions. So we have a deeply incised channel that is eroding quickly along the toe. the whole toe of it, you know, if you looked at it when the water was in it, you couldn't hardly tell. But when it started to dry up, you could see the whole toe was eroding about 2 to 4 feet tall, and in some areas even taller. This top right photo here, you know, you can see the erosion. Top left there, turbidity, lack of vegetation, bunch of different kinds of invasive species. Turbidity is just muddiness in the water, basically. And it was also undersized. So the channel was only designed to hold a 25-year flood, where the standard is a 100-year flood. So in this process, we are having a lot of different issues. One is that the stream doesn't have the opportunity to interact with vegetation, because at the toe, it's eroding away, the banks are too steep. So you get this situation where the water is constantly just lapping away at this erosive face and contributing these kind of plumes of sediment. And any pollutants that may have entered the system through the storm drain system or through direct dumping upstream in this very urban area have no opportunity to be filtered out, because they are not interacting with the vegetative kind of devices, the roots and the shoots that would do that filtering. There's also really not a lot of habitat complexity. It's all one depth, it's all one width, and there's no large woody structures or eddies or pools or places for animals to really hide out. So then along the banks, you have a whole bunch of different invasive species. We've got hemlock, poison hemlock, harding grass, Himalayan blackberry, vinca, and teasel as our dominant species across the whole site. So we started to work on restoration, but so here we are present day. There's 3 phases. So the pink phase is phase 1. That was done in 2014 and planted in 2015. The yellow phase is phase 2. That was constructed in 21, planted in 22. And then this is phase 3 that we just constructed last summer and through the fall, and we're now planting. And overall, the project reaches about 1.3 miles in length. But how much can we go back? You know, at this point, this stream was identified as a potential place for restoration, in part because there was still land around it that could be over time purchased and used to expand the channel and change the channel morphology. But we may not really be able to go back to where it was. And I think that's not even really the goal at this point. We have to find some kind of multi-beneficial use of this space that treats the people who live there and the plants and the animals all with equal respect. So we have a lot of different project goals. One is to increase the flood capacity, which we've done about 4x. So now it can contain a 100-year flood with about 2 feet of extra freeboard. One of the big ones that's multiply complex, and we're going to talk about more today, is the restoring the natural ecosystem services that are provided by that creek. Overall, it's about 15 acres of riparian area, 1.3 miles of stream habitat, which is a lot for a densely urbanized area and quickly urbanizing area. And then we also created an ADA accessible off-street pedestrian and bike path, and a future neighborhood park will be built. And then we are really working to encourage community stewardship of the creek. So we'll talk about all those different goals and how we're working on them. But first, how do you even go about building a new creek? We started with land acquisition. So over time, as various developers and homeowners have been willing sellers, we've worked with Sonoma County Ag and Open Space. They've been an amazing partner on this process through multiple phases, in which we have done land acquisition under their matching grant program, which is a 50-50 match, multiple times, and bought little parcels, chunks at a time, until we had the space to create all the meanders and things that we wanted to create. Then we did the CEQA for all 3 phases and 50% design for all 3 phases. That was done in 2010. And that was funded mostly with stormwater assessment fees. So anyone who lives in Santa Rosa, you pay an assessment fee that is based on the amount of hardscaping you have on your property and how much therefore you may be contributing to the stormwater runoff issues that we have. And that can go to support and help us to get some work done that puts us in a place to be shovel ready for grants. So then there's 3 years of, so then we go into implementation funding. So in this phase, it was grant funded by Department of Water Resources. They've actually funded all three phases, the Wildlife Conservation Board, and then part of it through our stormwater assessment fees, in addition to the Ag and Open Space funds that helped us procure the land. And then we went into, you've got 3 years of permitting pretty much per phase, 2 years of rare plant surveys, and then we go into the actual writing the permits, negotiating the permits for all our environmental permits. Then we finalize our designs during that time. We've got 1 year for construction and 1 year for planting, and then 5 years of intensive monitoring and maintenance. And then we go into long-term maintenance. So that's kind of our process as a city, and people might do it differently, but that's what we've been doing. So it takes a lot of big yellow machines to do this kind of work in an urban environment. And really, in a more rural environment, a much more ideal way to do this would be less carbon intensive and less intensive on the land. And we would put some beaver dam analogs, or maybe even a real beaver, and we would fence out cattle, and we would let the stream repair itself through natural processes. But in an urban environment, that puts you at a risk because there can be unintended consequences. You all saw how the stream meandered. The stream can meander in those situations, kind of anywhere it wants to. And it may or may not end up with the species that you're wanting, plants-wise. It may or may not end up with the flood capacity that you're needing. It certainly won't have a park or things like that in it. So we have to find this balance. And while as like the deep ecologist in me really wants it to just be nature-based and process-based, we've had to find something that's a kind of middle ground here. And just to describe these photos a little bit here, you're seeing just some aerial images as they're working on the stream. And you can see there's not a lot of vegetation. We're working on that.
Did you take out all the concrete in the upper?
We did not for that part. It's got development right up to the edge of it. And so we are not really able to address that part right now. Because there's homes and things like right up on the bank. So we started just downstream of that, where it started to become earthen and be broader, so we can, buy land next to it. And, so phase 3, some of the design features, it's 2,500 feet in length for this phase, 1.3 miles overall. It's got 30 log habitat structures, each of which have many logs in them, and they're sunk 15 feet into the ground with vertical log anchors and 15 feet back into the banks. So those logs are designed to look natural and never move because we don't want them to wash out bridges, etc. And then 6 acres of reconnected floodplain with native seeding, 15 pool and riffle complexes, about 500 feet of willow planted bank stability features, a 12-foot wide pedestrian bridge and pathway, and then 9,000 native plants that we are still planting, the last few hundred of them. And it's been a feat and an effort, and anybody who wants to come plant with me anytime, you're welcome to.
The 250 feet, is that per phase?
2,500 feet about per phase, yes. Yes. Yeah, because it's about a half mile.
Where were the plants growing?
I will get there. Great question. Laguna Foundation. So here we are, just a little sampling of kind of where we are in this year zero moment. We just finished construction. We just hydro-seeded. We're just now planting. And we are already getting some really good results. And there are some things that are very difficult that we're still working through. So you can see lupinus bicolor down in the corner is just exploded. And that one's really done well. The stream is running much clearer. We're getting more oxygenation and riffling effect. We're getting some pools that are starting to scour out as designed around the log habitat structures. A lot of people are coming and using the pathway. I'm seeing a lot of folks, kids, folks on bikes, folks with mobility issues who are really engaging with the stream in a different way that I had not previously seen after walking up and down the stream about 10,000 times, I think. We're getting some really nice native plants coming up in our seed mix. Here we have Lupinus microcarpus, Mattia elegans, and Emsinkia menziesii. Have all three done quite well. You're seeing some different, I think this is a white line sphinx moth caterpillar, the more colorful one. We're getting West Coast ladies. There's some, let's see, we've got some hooded mergansers swimming down there. So we're just getting some life starting to come back, even though it's still very open, still very fresh and new. And restoration projects can be like this, where in some ways, they step back first for quite a while. And in other ways, they're stepping forward, and we're kind of having to find that piece with both things at once. So here's our native planting strategy. This is Ayla, some of you all know her, from the Laguna Foundation. So our strategy has generally been to go wide with the variety of species that we're using, partly for climate adaptation, partly to provide year-round habitat, and partly because a scatter shot sometimes helps when you don't know what's going to work. You know, we're just trying stuff. So then we're also focusing on local genetics wherever possible. So Ayla and friends have done seed collection locally within the watershed to grow out these 9,000 native plants for us. We were not able to get enough native seed for the amount we needed. We needed like 320 pounds of seed, and nobody had that handy from local genetics, but we have all the native seed at least. And thinking about it as successional planning. Yes, our goal is eventually a riparian forest, but in the meanwhile, we have quite a long time where really this is a grassland. We need to manage it as a grassland until it becomes the next stage. And I think in previous phases, one of the lessons that we have learned is people have focused a lot on the plantings, the container plantings, and not much on the spaces between. And I think because of that, we've ended up with a lot of weed pressure in phase 2 in particular. Phase 1 got a lot of tending and kind of got lucky in some different ways. But we are really trying to focus on those spaces in between and use the lessons learned in terms of our plant selection, our techniques for installation, et cetera, from previous phases. So we're lucky to be now in a third phase, and I would say that's a benefit of breaking a project down to smaller sizes. We do have some significant site challenges though. Our biggest one is soil compaction. Alaric's here, and he is one of our partners on this project. They've done some soil testing, and they're finding in some places the soil is compacted over 300 psi, which is higher than we would want to grow plants. So we did our best. We knew that that was going to be an issue. It's something that we have worked on, and one of those strategies that we use is to till in some amendments into the upper layers. But we really have to be careful because the more we decompact the soil and the more we loosen the soil mechanically, the higher the risk is for erosion and bank failure. This is all freshly graded. It doesn't have roots to hold it in. And if you have a bunch of really loose soil out there, it's very high risk that it's going to wash away. So we have to find that sweet spot again, you know, a balance between what we want to have and what we can kind of justify from an urban setting. Then the other big piece is a lack of soil biology. Really, the soil is our main limiting factor right now. So we've got a soil test here that we did in phase 2, which is kind of an indicator of what we're looking at because we're doing it's really subsoil. This soil hasn't hosted plants since a long time ago, pre-1942. It was a field, it was agriculture through that time, but it really now is being dug down 10 to 15 feet. And that's not where the active plant roots were, not where the microbes were. And so we have this, this newly exposed subsoil that doesn't have a lot of life in it yet. The stream also lacks shade. It lacked shade before, it still lacks shade, but even more so now. We're hoping that'll grow in quickly. Let me get some water. Sorry guys, I have a recovering sinus infection and I lose my voice quickly. Weed pressure, another one everyone deals with, but we in particular have some untended spaces that are not in our control. They're around the project area. Vandalism, sometimes it's unintentional. We get a lot of kids going out there and, you know, pulling out stakes, messing with stuff. Some of it's not unintentional, but it's a highly public spot. Anyone can go there anytime. And water access is not impossible, but difficult. And then there's just generally low nitrogen. So you can see in our soil test here, we have a high pH, low organic matter, low nitrogen, low phosphorus, and then kind of high on some of our secondary micronutrients. So you have to be a little careful with the soil. We can't go too wild with certain amendments because A, we don't want to grow weeds, and B, we don't want to cause a spike in one of these, you know, secondary micronutrients that can cause a dysregulation in the plants.
Is this a reason test?
This is phase 2 from like a year or two ago. Yeah. So just post restoration in phase 2, when the soil was still relatively bare, therefore pretty similar to what we're dealing with now. So some of our hopeful strategies for success. With the soil compaction, this is our hardest issue. And locally, we can deal with it by basically in our planting spots using an auger to loosen the soil up, so that at least at each container planting, they have some looseness to work with. We're still working on a better way, and biological loosening of the soil is probably going to be the way that we do that. The lack of soil biology and organic matter. So Rainforest Rising is here. They are working on liquid biological amendments, which are helping to bring in some of that biology. And we're also we tilled in compost and some amendments based on our soil test. And I know that traditionally the native plant wisdom would be don't amend it, don't add compost, but we're just in subsoil here. It's really not like planting in a garden space or something like that where it's easy to be too rich. So we're adding in compost to the holes at about a 1/3 ratio. We're adding in a small amount, the most compost we could afford, basically, into the site. It ended up being 760 yards of compost, which is a lot when you see it in a pile. But it's still only 3.4 yards per 1,000 square feet. And then with our plant selection, we had to choose non-traditional riparian plants in some ways. They deal with flooding, but they're also in full sun. And so a lot of the riparian plants you would typically choose and use would be more shade adapted. We don't have that. So we've had to be thoughtful in how we choose these plants, and that does limit down your plant selection some. Although we still have almost 100 species, I think. And we are really focusing right now with the weed pressure on hand pulling all the weeds before they set seed, which is a gargantuan task. We've already put in 600 person hours. We've got 600 more to go in the next week. So it's, but we're really trying to get ahead of it with the weed pressure so that we can reduce that seed bank. Water access, we're going to use fire hydrants and K-line as a potential irrigation source. We're looking into it right now. We've traditionally hand watered and we'll still hand water some. K-line is it's a type of irrigation that's very tough and it's reusable. And you see it on farms. People drag it with their ATVs. It has these little kind of bulbs in it that have a sprinkler inside. Can anybody picture that? Anyways, it's a potential temporary option for us that is very sturdy. But with the low nitrogen, we've been using slow release amendment. So we have the compost, the cottonseed meal, and then the high rates of nitrogen fixing plants in our seed list. And with vandalism, we're really embracing trying to make it a community space. So art, signage, community involvement, and then just quick repair when there is an issue so that we don't get into the broken window theory and having people feel like it's a rundown space. So some installation techniques, we are focusing, like we said, on loosening up that soil. So we're using an auger. It just makes it a lot faster too when we have 9,000 plants. We're not planting all of them with an auger. Some of them are the right size for a dibble tool, so we're using that as well. We're emitting in the soil. Then we're using biodegradable weed mats. Traditionally, a lot of restoration projects use plastic. We're not using herbivory cages. It hasn't been a big issue at the site, so we don't want all the plastic. So we are using wood stakes to help identify these as the plants grow up. Our oak trees are still small and our grasses and things are getting tall. It really helps us find them and keep taking care of them. We did a fall hydroseed application, and with that we tilled in the compost amendments. We also used Point Blue's climate planning tool to help us pick our plant list. So we went, like I said, for diversity, and they have a great tool here that can help with picturing how your plants at maturity are going to support wildlife and adapt to climate change. So the graph on the left shows, we don't have every single plant on our list in their database, but a lot of them are in there. So it shows that we have quite a bit going on that can tolerate full sun, as we discussed, clay soil, which we have, wet conditions, which we have. And that all means that in the future, if it gets wetter or drier, we have adaptability. We have quite a few species who can go either way. For instance, we put in blue and black oaks in some places. Even though they're not super locally native, they have survived on the site previously to large sizes. There are existing ones out there. And in a hotter world, that might make sense. They might be the ones to do the best. So we're trying it. They're at a lower percentage than our valley oaks, for instance, but they're there as options. Resources for wildlife, really trying to make sure that we have a diversity of wildlife. And we'll get in there with the fruit sources more once we get shade. A lot of those plants are going to need a little shade. And then the flower and seed availability being year round. So we really try to get a bunch of different species that are going to support animals year round. So you can see here. So that does not include, like I said, all the 67 species that we've currently planted, and we've got 34 more planned for infill planting. But we are trying to really cover most of the year. So I'm just going to go quickly because we all like plants here. How much do you all want to know? Do you want to just read these a little bit yourselves? Do you want me to tell you a little bit about them?
I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah. So with our tree list, we went with 4 oak species, mostly live oak has done really well on the site, and valley oak. We've got box elder, buckeye, Oregon ash, black walnut, Fremont's cottonwood, red willow, Pacific willow, and Mexican elderberry. And varying quantities based on how they have done over time. For instance, the elderberry, personal favorite, but it has struggled on site. And I think once we get a little more shade, it'll do better. So there's always the opportunity to infill later. Yeah, it's not going to be happy in subsoil. We have issues, so it'll come in later as the soil gets better. We can always plant more. The shrubs, we have common manzanita, coyote brush, toyon, twinberry, silverbush lupine, coffeeberry, rose, blackberry, snowberry, and grape. And again, some of these, they might not do that well. I'm thinking grape, it's gonna want some shade, it's gonna want some structure to climb on. But we are in a place where we are going way above and beyond what's required of us mitigation wise. So we can play a little bit and see what can survive and what can do well and bring in that diversity. And even if just a few of those plants make it in time, that's a propagation source on site as the conditions change. The forward list is extensive, and we really went for bloom periods that align with monarch migration and that stretch seasonally through the hot season, through the fall, really trying to stretch that window of opportunity for wildlife to feed. And then with the graminoids, we went very heavy on the Santa Barbara sedge and our other kind of grass-like plants. And part of the reasoning for that is that these plants can help really colonize a space. They've done really well in phase 1 at filling in large areas, and they can anchor the banks, they can provide nesting habitat, and they also can outcompete weeds in a way that a lot of individual plants can't. And once they get going, they just go. And that's a huge section then that is basically being tended by the plants themselves rather than us. That's helpful. So we put in 5,000 Santa Barbara sedge, all grown by Laguna Foundation. And then we're doing some transplants of the river bulrush, and then we've got creeping wild rye, Pacific rush, and gray rush, all grown by the Laguna Foundation. And over time, as these colonies establish, then we can work with student groups and volunteers, like we've done in phase 1, to go and propagate and transplant from the on-site colonies into new spots on the creek. Our seed list is long. I decided to just do a CalFlora link, and if anybody wants to look at it later, you can. It's very long. I won't read it all to you, but lots of lupin. Excuse me. And other nitrogen fixers again, because they have been a real important part of this puzzle. So one big piece of this is kind of experimental. We're doing 2 acres of monarch meadows, rainforest rising alerts here from that group. They're a nonprofit, and we are experimenting, and you can see here the kind of hatch marked areas is approximately where the monarch meadows will end up. And it's going to be milkweed and a whole host of other species that support pollinators, specifically timed with the monarch migration period. And those seeds are being primed with native beneficial microbes. They're being temperature primed, and there are we're going through a process to figure out what's going to work the best, but essentially the goal is to help give them a jump start so that when they hit the ground, they can grow more quickly and more easily, and be able to, establish more quickly, especially because in this site, we always have the risk with a fall seeding, in which you put things out there early in the year and you just let them kind of bake as you would want, things wash away. We've seen that in phases 1 and 2, that we get a big flood and seeds wash away. And so we have to be able to have kind of a fall and a spring strategy that bring us some different options in case there is a big flood. And they're also spreading liquid biological amendments that are being brewed from compost that's aerated in water and then being spread on the site to help bring that biology back into the soil. So here's our Santa Barbara sedges, again, 5,000 sedges, and most of that's all being planted by the Conservation Corps North Bay and myself and my staff being out there. And one of the things we're seeing is nitrogen fixers have performed super well on site. They're our best early colonizers. It's not a huge surprise to see that, but the amount to which they are doing amazing out there is really interesting. So this is just a little graphic I thought was kind of cool, showing how these nitrogen fixing bacteria work, in that they are being colonized by bacteria, basically, that is helping them to create nitrogen from the air and turn it into soil. And so the main weeds we're dealing with are vetch and burr clover, 2 nitrogen fixers. And that's telling me, again, nitrogen is needed in this soil, and that's what's going to survive well there. When you pull them up, they're super thick with these little nodules that you can see here. But it's also lupin and clover are doing super well there too. And so we're trying to just edge it towards those native nitrogen fixers instead. So one of the ways that we're able to achieve this kind of project, because it's really large, when you're out there, you just go, whoa, this is a big project. I feel that way every day. It's like my second baby. I have a 3.5-year-old too. And then I also have Colgan Creek. And so one of the ways we can achieve that is through partnerships with nonprofits that have a strong community base and bringing the community in to help support the implementation of the project. Good Foundation has been a primary partner on phase 2 and 3, and they've done an excellent job. They've been hosting volunteer events. We just had our last one on Saturday, had 72 people attend. We're getting a lot of folks coming out and repeat, wanting to help plant and be part of this kind of historic project moment. We also work a lot with different service groups, Sonoma State, Russian River Keepers, Conservation Works, Scouts, Rotary. High school students reach out to us frequently, needing volunteer hours. And so it's amazing that this project can become kind of that space where you can host people. So here's just some fun pictures, because who wants to see fun pictures of restoration, right? Here's the Laguna Foundation and some volunteers who are working on some of the first plantings as volunteer events. Here's some more volunteers. We're getting a lot of kids coming out. We're getting a lot of folks of different ethnicities, different backgrounds, people who've never planted plants, neighbors, just all kinds of people are wanting to be. And we're also doing this kind of community supported planting and maintenance effort through paid workforce opportunities for young folks. So Conservation Corps North Bay and Circuit Rider Community Services have been on our team as seasonal support, where we hire their crew. They come out and help us get done. A lot of the more kind of moderately specialized work we bring to them. And then our staff is there providing daily leadership and oversight of all of that, but they are essential. We just don't have that. We are a team of Stormwater and Creeks is 13, but Creeks is just 4. And so it's a big project for us to do ourselves. So it's really essential to have them. We also work with supervised probation work crews, and they're helpful for limited things as well, not the specialized work, but when we need to mow, I can flag out, don't mow my Ulmus triticorides, mow everything else, and they can do that. If I flag it, they can avoid it. They're also good for trash cleanups and that kind of thing. So we're getting a lot of help from different avenues here. And all those are opportunities for education to go back out, because most of those folks interacting with the project don't know anything about native plants. They don't understand the hydrology of the system, but they do by the end. And all of that's embedded under our Creek Stewardship Program. Some of you may have heard about this before. Did Sean McNeil speak to you all a number of years ago? I don't know how many folks were here then, but The Creek Stewardship Program is the city and county's program. It's basically, we have 100 miles of creeks in the city of Santa Rosa inside the city limits. And so this program has been going since 2002 to help support those streams. We have all kinds of activities. We do creek stewards who are like kind of an adopt a creek type of program. We've got all kinds of educational programming in schools. We've got twice a month volunteer creek cleanups, plus other customized volunteer opportunities as different groups come to us, or we organize special events on Earth Day, things like that. We've got a lot of time spent on responding to issue reports. You know, people can tell us they found trash here or there. We deal with it, erosion, that kind of stuff. Creek maintenance, youth conservation corps, and then the probation crew cleanups are twice a week, year round. So we've got a lot going on, and that gives us something to kind of nest this program into, which is part of what has made it successful and part of what's made it grant fundable as well. Annually, that's 400 events, 5 to 10,000 people through our educational program, and 1,100 cubic yards of trash on average. A lot of it's all funded through the water agency and our stormwater assessment fees. And it supports our stormwater permits, and also it's part of our citywide creek master plan. So just some little interesting bits about our education with schools, environment. If anybody's ever worked with Stephanie Lennox, she's just a delight. So good at her job. She's been doing our environmental education leadership for 21 years. And she's just working with a ton of students, including at Colgan Creek, because LC Island High School backs up to Colgan Creek. And there's a couple of other creek or schools within walking distance as well. So she's been having a program go there really since the mid-90s of students coming out in their science classes and engaging with the stream. So through that, we've got a lot of monitoring data. They also help with the creek stewardship and the restoration pieces. And through all of that, Colgan has become this as-needed community resource. We get people reaching out all the time about things. They want to do a senior capstone project. They are interested in a career exploration program. We start a career exploration program. They want to get volunteer hours for their school, things like that. And it gives us a place, like through restoration, we've been able to make this creek accessible. Because before, you really couldn't send people down very easily into this steep eroding creek, you know, full of blackberries. It's just not a comfortable place to go. And now it's a place where people can come and be part of that landscape and understand, even right here in our backyard, there's a place for native riparian corridors, and there's a place for animals and things to be, you know, we see otters, we see different animals using this creek that you would not expect. We've even seen a beaver in this creek. It came and chewed down one tree and then it left. Maybe it'll come back one day, hopefully when my trees are quite large. And so it's just kind of it's the intangible piece of restoration that sometimes people forget about, is the human element. Some of our bioassessment programs, it's a hands-on citizen science opportunity for students. We've got a lot of different high schools, but at Colgan Creek, we have regular interaction every year with multiple classes, 5 to 14 classes on average over the year, depending on their schedule and different things, for 4 to 5 sessions per class. So 150 to 420 high school students are getting a whole bunch of sessions in the field and in the classroom to learn about watershed health. And it's all because this creek restoration is right there. And they have actually done a huge part of transplanting all the sedges and transplanting all the Elmis triticioides. They look at habitat characteristics, so they have worksheets that go through erosion, canopy cover, water flow, trash, large woody debris, and substrate. They look at water quality, so they're doing little samples with looking at water chemistry and learning how to understand that. And then we pull out aquatic macroinvertebrates under a permit, and they can look at them and calculate based on how sensitive those species are to water quality, whether they're restoration over quality. And they help with stewardship, like we talked about, such as some fun photos of students working in the creek. And one of the things that we talked about, again, the human element is so important. So the public amenities are coming to this site. They're in process. We've been working with the Federated Indians of Great Rancheria on a very large mural. It's 600 feet long by 7 feet tall. We hired an artist, and they will be telling stories from Greg Sedaris's How a Mountain Was Made. And I don't know if you all know that book, but it's got many different tribal stories. So it's telling stories from that book with a perspective of current day folks who are living here still and still very much inhabiting this place with their ancestors who also inhabited this place. So you can see in some of the images here on the right, this is just strips of the wall. So it'll start on the left and go down it'll start top left and go down to bottom right. All in a row on one wall, but we had to stack it obviously for fitting here. But you can see there's ancestors and current day folks, and there's native plants, and we'll go through, you know, the lilies and things are now their concept level. They'll become actual native plants here, but in Colgan Creek. But when community members use that space, they care more. We have another mural going on as well at the bridgehead. We are putting in these really cool meandering benches that kind of mimic the meandering stream. We've got some beautiful interpretive signage coming. There's, you know, trash cans. We planted some larger shade trees like live oak, valley oak that will help provide a little bit more immediate coverage above the benches. Pet waste bag dispensers. We're really just trying to make it a space that is welcoming to folks. And so on that note, I guess I want to welcome you all. If anybody wants to be involved in this project, if you feel called to this or another restoration project, we would love to work with you. We would love to have more hands and more knowledgeable folks who know things about native plants to see the value in this project and help it. And it's going to go through a little bit of a rough patch in the beginning. Restoration projects always do. They look worse before they look better. But it looks beautiful already, and it's starting, and you can see the hope in the soil, and you can see the hope in the plants growing. So I hope some of you want to be involved. And that is the end of my presentation. Here's a little picture phase two, just planting. Look, these nice tall box elders, willows, loggers. Yeah, so it will happen. It doesn't take that long.
Where's the mural to be put on?
Let me go back. Get back to slide one. Do you quickly go to slide one?
Not extreme.
I'll just
No faster than
zoom.
that.
Okay,
Yeah.
we're zooming. Let me show you the aerial image. On the very first slide. Come on. Okay, so can you see right here where the equipment's all lined up, that wall? It'll be that. So there will be everything there that's the lighter color of soil. That's the future park site. So it wraps around the corner and, you know, there's going to be a public input process. We don't know exactly what will go into that park yet. They're hiring a designer for a public input process, but my hope is that there will be some native plants and, you know, cool native plant demonstration garden maybe, and playground equipment and who knows what else. But along that back wall there, it will be, which that's Colgan, or that's Burbank Housing to the north. So the wall actually belongs to them, and they're being generous in giving us a license to use it for the mural. Yeah. Any other questions?
Are all three spaces ready to be walked on now?
Yes,
Yeah.
they're all open to the public. And we do plan right now, the trail dead ends. Then we're building the Hearn Avenue Community Hub to the north on Hearn Ave. So there's one property in between, and we're working on doing some land swapping and stuff. It has like 16 owners though, so it's gonna take a while. Once we get that land, then we can punch the trail through to the Hearn Avenue Community Hub, and then you can get onto the smart train tracks and the trail there. So it's a connection into our regional trail system all off-road.
And the park design, are they considering a green playground?
I think it's all open right now. It's go to the public meetings and have, if you have interest in this park or what could be there, even as just a demonstration, even if you don't live right there, go to the meetings. That's how they end up deciding what goes there. Yes.
You say 15 feet of soil is not there anymore? Where did it all?
Great question. Yes. So we had to move for this project 36,000 cubic yards of soil, 22,000 of which got off-hauled. Team Gelati did the construction. They've actually done all three phases. It's a public bid process, but they've come in low bid on all. They had a permitted site down off of Lakeville Highway somewhere and they trucked it down there. I really wanted to send it to a wetland restoration site that needed sediment in the bay. But it was just too expensive to truck it down there. The extra trucking and the extra carbon emissions and all of it, it turned out that it wasn't feasible in the price that we could afford for the project.
So your project, you moved to 15 feet?
Yes, so
Wow.
because the stream was in a channel over on one side, and so now it has a huge connected floodplain. And the floodplain, yeah, it's a large inset floodplain, and to create that and to move the stream over from where it was, we did, backfill the section of stream that was a 90-degree turn. And we moved the stream over to be kind of the hypotenuse of the triangle and to have that meander, and then we widened it a lot. And so as it's lower and wider, that soil has to go somewhere. It's an interesting part of it. It's something that for me, again, as an ecologist, it feels like, woo, I would rather just let the process do this, but it's not really tenable once a stream is to that issue.
I have a question.
15.
This sounds very expensive. What is the cost? The only time I heard you talk about the cost concerning this would be with Giovanni on trucking. But surely these are tax dollars that, who's monitoring this?
Yeah. So it's a mix of different grant funds, and some stormwater and creeks funds as well. But we've just saved up year after year for many years, because like I said, this planning process started. For this phase is with land acquisition, all the permitting, which the permitting is about $2 million. So just keep that in mind. Permitting is very expensive. It is $11 million. Yeah, so it's expensive. It is really expensive.
But worth it.
I think it will be worth it in the long term. It's in the short term, it is really expensive. And in the long term, we just can't keep letting it pump sediment into the Laguna and keep letting it just be kind of a forgotten ditch when we have the opportunity to do something different for the long term. Hundreds of years from now, this stream has the opportunity to still be really an ecologically functional place in an urban environment where that is not going to be common and available in most places.
Who or what entity is providing oversight on the spending?
The city with, we have.
The cities.
Right, so we design the project and develop the project, and then we apply for the grants, and then each grant funder has deliverables that we deliver on. And then we have a conservation easement into perpetuity that's monitored by Sonoma County Ag and Open Space. We have a 25-year maintenance and monitoring plan with our grant funders. So there's oversight in those ways from the grant funders as well. And then the permitting agencies as well. We have requirements that we need to meet.
So you said you have multiple grants. Are they through, who they access through the Resource Conservation District?
So it's Department of Water Resources. They have an urban streams restoration program that we applied for. And the Wildlife Conservation Board provided, so urban streams provided 4.4 million. The Wildlife Conservation Board provided a little over 2 million. And then Ag and Open Space provided 1.5 million.
To address that compaction, did you consider key lime pile or anything like that? On the contour to try it?
So we did talk about it, and the concern was that if it wasn't perfectly level, it created a place where you could have rilling and erosion that kind of formed through. And it was also in some places steep in a way, like some of the upper bank areas are still steep in a way that would be difficult for a tractor to access. So we did talk about it, and the designers, I'm not the designer. I'm the one who is a squeaky wheel about like, we gotta save all the trees and what about the compost and blah, blah, blah. But I did the native plant selection and that kind of thing. But the engineers who designed it vetoed that idea.
Typical.
Yes.
Is there any other stream of this nature that could be restored and
They're certainly in Sonoma County. In Santa Rosa, there are other opportunities that we're looking at, and we're starting our planning process now for what comes next. We're still very deep in, we're just now planting everything. I'm going, I was planting just the other day. Like, we're still very much in this project, and we will be for the next few years. But we are starting to do our long-term planning process for what streams we want to work on next. And some of those are, one of the main constrictions for stream restoration in an urban context is when you have a lot of private development up against a stream, it's not reasonable to go and, remove all those folks from their homes and, reclaim it for the stream. That's just not something that we would or could do. But it is something where we are looking at the spaces where we do have control in parks, in golf courses, even parts of downtown. The city actually doesn't own very much creek. We help manage the 100 acre or 100 miles of streams through sort of a combined effort with Sonoma Water, but most of it's actually about 50% of it's private, and a lot of the rest is Sonoma Water owned. So we only own, I think, about 10% of the stream reaches in Santa Rosa. So we have limited areas where we can work.
You provide pools for tadpoles, turtles.
Yeah.
Et cetera.
So this is a stream that supports northwestern pond turtle, and so we put in a series of basking rocks, where at each pool there's each pool is designed to scour down over time. So they're not that deep right now, but they're designed to scour down 3 to 4 feet around the log structures. And as they do so, that creates those deep pools for breeding and things like that with frogs and other things. So in phase 1, that's been around now for 10 years, we see these really deep pools around the log structures, and that's where we get a lot of breeding, a lot of bird nesting, and the turtles like to hang out there as well. In this phase, we really designed specifically with turtles in mind, and frogs as a byproduct of that, because we really wanted to create log structures that they could get out on. We wanted to create rock structures that they could bask on. We are doing our planting design with a balance of wanting to shade the stream as much as we can while still leaving sunny places where they can bask.
It's year-round water on that creek.
It dries up for a short time, yeah. It probably didn't always, but it does now because hydrology has become so altered in the urban place, yes.
So for fire control, are the banks managed, how is that?
It's kind of a mixture. We really want to favor the native plants. So as we get stands of native plants starting to establish, then we don't weed eat those because we want them to go to seed. So when we get like a creeping wild rye stand, then we won't weed eat that one. But right. They are flexible because in streams doesn't seem to be the way that a lot of fire is moving, because the streams are keeping the soil hydrated better than another similar kind of space in the uplands. So we weed eat along the upper banks. We weed eat some around each planting if we need to. We weed eat areas that have invasive species issues, but we don't go through and just mow the whole thing. But it's surrounded on, it's got concrete pad. That's a 12-foot wide concrete. It's 10 feet with 2-foot gravel shoulder pathway on each side. It's got a gravel maintenance road on one side. It's got a park that's going to be, maintained, etc. So from a fire perspective, it's not one of the WUI category spaces that the fire service is most concerned about.
You get a waiver for us.
I don't know that we have like a written waiver. We just coordinate mowing with them and kind of let them know what we're doing. It's kind of interdepartmental. Yeah, I mean, it's different. Like, we're all we all work for the same people. Yeah.
I was just wondering, in this part of the creek we're looking at, is that phase 1, 2, 3?
This is phase 3. This is just a corner of phase 3. So phase 3 keeps going to the north. Phase 1 is downstream of this bridge in the corner. That's Dutton Meadow. And it keeps going. So phase 3 is this whole corner and then up to the north, all north of that neighborhood. And then where the neighborhood ends, it becomes phase 2. We had to do it in a sort of funny way where the middle section got done last, because we had to wait for land acquisition of that large parcel there, the one that backs up to the concrete wall.
till we have willing sellers.
The 90-degree turn, yeah.
Yes, that is the old 90-degree turn. The old turn goes off the page. You really can't see where it used to go. This is the realigned version. And it actually has this really cool feature where there's a double culvert that comes in, that drains pretty much all of Corby Avenue. And the whole auto row, it's pretty much all hardscaping through there. So it just pumps water out. And it used to pump it straight into the creek with zero filtration. The culverts were in the creek. And it actually would backwater into the culverts a lot, and so it deposited all this sediment out into the culverts, and then that would be washed back into the creek. So it was just in and out of sediment and kind of a whole mess. And so what we did is rather than extend those culverts out to the stream, we created a whole side channel that has a confluence. You can see it right under the bridge there. And that will be really heavily planted with filtering species, the sedges, rushes, water parsley, things that can help clean that source of water that could carry more pollutants from the hardscaping,
Especially from Auto Row.
from auto row, et cetera. Yes.
I have a clarifying question from the Zoom.
Yes.
Is the path continue into phase one and phase
So-
two? I know you touched on that.
Yeah, so in this screenshot here, this aerial image, the path isn't yet concrete, but it's the northern side. So there's a bike path that's running along the south side, and then the trail downstream continues gravel downstream, but you can just cross this short little bridge and get on the paved bike path there. And it keeps going to the north, and then it dead ends up in the end of phase two, but it will eventually go through to the Hearn Avenue hub once we can get the land acquisition done up there. Any other questions? Yes.
I'm wondering how the water's sinking in. Is it sinking in better than before?
So it does help slow spread and sink the water. Because it's a channel, it is not our intention to fully pond the water there and keep it there forever. It's to allow it to flow as it would have. So it does hold water and it does sink in. It holds quite a bit of water because it's mostly clay soil, and it has a much higher. So now the stream and the planting area, floodplain area are much closer together in elevation. Whereas before it was kind of the upper banks are the upper banks, the stream is 15-20 feet down lower, and they're not really interacting that much. And so now the water table can come, the water, we can't change the slope of the site overall. It starts the same at the beginning, like we can't change where the creek comes in and where it goes out. And so we can only work within that. But there's not much grade change. It's only about, 0.5% of grade change from the top of the reach to the bottom of the reach in phase 3. So you have very little fall over the course of the creek. So a lot of the water stays there because it's pretty flat as it would have been pre-restoration a long time ago.
You didn't change the bottom of the creek level.
So
Over the side.
so you can see basically, I wish I had a better, in my mind, it was so obvious what this used to look like. So it used to be this trapezoidal shape, so it looked like this. So it had these steep banks like this and a flat bottom. And it was pretty narrow, about 50 feet across from the top of the bank to the top of the bank, and 11 feet or so at the bottom. So it was relatively narrow and quite deep. And then every time you would get a big storm, the water would flash flood up to the upper banks almost, and just kind of rip through there for about 3 hours and then drop down. And sometimes it was coming up and flooding the neighborhood. It floods O'Hare Court. It floods people's all the way up to the streets into their front doors. I don't think it's going into people's houses with the storms that we've had recently, but it could. So we didn't try to change the elevation of the stream bottom, because then what you would basically be doing is, the stream comes in here and it comes out there. So if we raised it up, then the stream's going to flow backwards. If we lower it, the stream is going to become a pond. So the stream bottom elevation needs to stay about the same, but we moved the stream bottom, and then so that it meanders and has the opportunity for sediment to be settled out in these bins, and for scours to form, and for different habitat types, deep, shallow, etc., to form. in these meanders and bends and pools and riffles. And then we widened out the floodplain around it. So now if we had 100-year storm, it could flood out into that floodplain, no problem. And continue on its way through there without topping the banks. And like I said before, it was only designed for a 25-year flood. So in a 100-year flood event, it would have been way out of the banks. So it is an expansion of the floodplain, but it's not bringing the floodplain to a total, like, it's not bringing the stream to a different elevation. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, it's a complex project, but I really appreciate your questions, and I hope that you all get to come out and see some native plants grow over time.
Really good. I'm so glad you brought in an element of prehistory and history. Makes a big difference.
Yeah, we don't, I wish we had those photos and things.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you had those quotes.
Yeah.
That was a nice surprise. Thank you so much.